get started, welcome to the Lone Tree Art Center's virtual Spark presentation. We're so thrilled to be here with you today, as always. I'm Lee Chandler. I'm the Artistic Director here at the Lone Tree Art Center. And before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors for this program: Charles Schwab, Belco, the National Endowment for the Arts, Colorado Creative Industries, and the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District. This is actually going to be our last virtual Spark. We're going to be resuming in-person Sparks this fall, probably in September. We're going to be taking the summer off. But we will be resuming it, like I said, in person in September. We're going to have social time afterward, and I look forward to seeing you all in person then. As always, today's program is going to be interactive, so please participate if you feel comfortable. If you'd rather not speak out loud, you can type it in chat or send a message to me, the host, in the chat, and I'll say your answer out loud. And of course, as always, if you don't want to be seen on the screen, you can totally turn off your video and we will not be offended. And now for the presentation. Today we are getting a look at Janine Madden's trip to National Parks and Monuments over the past year. Janine is a frequent Spark facilitator, and she also recently presented a virtual art appreciation class for the Lone Tree Art Center, which was fantastic. She's a longtime usher here, and she's been involved with our community impact programs, from Spark to sensory-friendly programming to being an outreach ambassador at schools, and we're super lucky to have her. So please welcome Janine.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for attending our virtual Spark session this month. As Lee said, my name is Janine, and I'm super happy to be with you guys today. It's going to be a very, I've learned from watching Maureen's excellent slides from all of the travel that she's done. And so she inspired me to share some of the photos that we took when we were traveling across the country. So some of you may know that my husband Dave and I left Colorado in September of 2020. And we really have been traveling ever since. We just, like this past week, settled here in Chelmsford, Massachusetts, which is really not too far from where I grew up in Quincy, Massachusetts, home of 2 presidents and its very own National Historic Park. So today we are going to explore some of the really extraordinary national treasures of the United States Park Service that we encountered as we traveled across the country. Stop after stop, we were continually amazed and awed by the magnificence of the natural wonders in our nation, from dormant volcanoes and lava flows to petrified tree trunks, and seriously, everything in between. The geology of our planet was just simply stunning. And I always wonder why I was a biology major in college, because I really should have been a geology major in college, because I really love geology, and to see it is to travel through the national park system and the country. I'll do my best to get through as many places as I can, and I welcome you to comment on what you see, share similar experiences you've had, and we have a lot to cover, so we're going to go ahead and get started. But to begin with, which and where are some of your favorite national parks? You can just speak out loud or put them in the chat, places that you've been.
I really enjoyed Glacier National Park. I went on a girls' trip a year and a half ago, I guess. Yeah.
Is that in the northern part of the country? Is that in Washington State?
Like Wyoming, I mean, not Wyoming, Montana.
Okay.
Yeah, Western Montana.
And were there actual glaciers there?
There actually is, but you know, of course they're shrinking, but they're beautiful.
Wow, that's extraordinary. Anybody else?
Bryce and Zion.
Yeah, Bryce and Zion are gorgeous. Bryce is what you see in my virtual background. I don't know. Oh, actually, you won't be able to see that until the end when I stop sharing. But actually, you may be able to see me in the strip across the top. I'm not sure what you can see, but I think you can see my screen and then all of the participants. Bryce was probably the most amazing geological wonder I have ever seen in my whole entire life. It was just absolutely amazing. So And Zion too, those Utah parks. So I'm sorry, go ahead. Oh, sorry. And Zion too. All of those Utah parks were amazing. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about some of the parks that we visited on our trip. But before that, this is the America the Beautiful Pass, the National Parks Pass. So many of you are aware that there are several kinds of annual park passes that we can get. And we invested in the America the Beautiful Pass last June. And it was a renewal from the previous year when I used it a lot at the Cape Cod National Seashore. They have beautiful beaches there and they're all part of the National Park Service. And so instead of paying $30 every day to go to the beach, you show your pass. We also visited 5 of the Utah National Parks and Mount Rushmore. So for us, that was back in 2019. It was well worth the $80 fee. This year, my husband won't mind me saying that he turned 62. And so he will be getting his lifetime senior pass. But while we were at Carlsbad Caverns, he presented his military ID card and he was given a lifetime military pass. So there's lots of different options. And I think there's like about 2,000 federal recreation sites. It covers all your entrance fees. It's really an amazing opportunity. Children age 15 and under are free. And I'll put a link in the chat to check out those passes. But where we live, I think it's Acadia in Maine is probably the closest. Have you been there, Lee?
Yeah, I have too.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Okay.
It's totally beautiful.
Yeah. And I hear they have a reservation system in place, but we're really hoping to get up there with our pass before, during the summer, perhaps, when Maine is probably one of the nicest places to be in the country. Also, if you have 4th graders in your life, whether they are students or grandchildren, they also can get a pass for free. And those with disabilities can get a pass for free, as well as a volunteer pass. There are 6 agencies that participate in the pass program: the National Park Service, the U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Bureau of Land Management, Bureau of Reclamation, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So if you consider taking a drive out to Rocky Mountain National Park or Great Sand Dunes or the fossil beds, I really recommend grabbing a pass. And so there's quite a bit of national park sites in Colorado, which is where the majority of our guests are from today. So I'm going to throw that in there. Here's where we used our pass in the last 9 months. So here we are. How many of you have been down to the Great Sand Dunes in the southern part of Colorado? Yeah.
The Great Sand Dunes? No. Okay.
Just it's good. Great. It's amazing. It's amazing. So we stashed all of our stuff from 30 plus years of marriage into a 16-foot storage pod, and we headed for the great outdoors. We took our COVID precautions seriously, and we had masks and hand sanitizer. We had a suitcase and a backpack each. And our intention originally was to return to Colorado. Our plan was to leave in September, come back to Colorado in December. So we brought winter clothes. But really, we found as we were traveling, our plans were changing constantly. And at other times of our lives, we might have been filled with sort of, trepidation about that. But I will say that during COVID, there was just a unique sense of freedom that we experienced as we began our journey. And preceding it was my husband's decision to retire, which really made a huge difference. And that's why we were commenting earlier that we're in no rush. And that's kind of our mantra now. It's pretty nice. We did take before we left Colorado, we took a short overnight down to the Great Sand Dunes National Park. They have the tallest dunes in North America, and they spread over 30 square miles. The surface of the sand can reach 150 degrees Fahrenheit on a summer afternoon or drop to -20 degrees on a winter night. they originated from large lakes that once covered portions of the San Luis Valley. And so if you'd like to learn more about the geology, two things, I'm going to throw a link in the chat, and I'll talk about those links in a second. But because at the end, there's a way for you to save all those links, and I'll show you how to do that. Please, someone remind me. And so here are a few pics of the sand dunes.
The sand dunes.
Really, yeah, just crazy.
Oh, in Colorado.
And
all the same.
in Colorado. And so it's cool and not so cool. The hidden dune is becomes, and I love this part of it because it's also very fluid. It becomes the tallest dune at Great Sand Dunes in North America at 742 feet from the base to the top. Star Dune was whittled down by strong winds, dropping its height from 755 to 741 in July of 2020. So these are and I may be mispronouncing this, so please feel free to correct me. Is it Sangre de Cristo Mountains in the background?
Yeah, you said it pretty well, Janine.
Oh, okay, good. I need a Spanish speaker to help me there.
Yeah,
And then
actually Sangre de Cristo.
Sangre
de Cristo.
Perfect. De Cristo. Wonderful. Well, I found what was quite interesting was number one, it was quite the cardio workout because you're walking and you're like, oh, this is not what I expected. So, you know, it's a little bit different than walking from the pier to the water in California. But we could walk on the sand in our bare feet and climb up onto the dunes. But I was really comforted by the fact that with a strong wind, all of the evidence of our being there would really be blown away, which was great because we were blown away by this amazing, amazing sight. It was just incredible. And we walked barefoot. You know, the sand wasn't broiling hot at all. So it was beautiful. And I will preface the whole slideshow by saying that I probably have, 40 or 50 photos of each place that we went. And so I had to kind of cull it down for the presentation today. So when we officially left Colorado, the first leg of our journey, this was back in the fall of 2020, had us driving. So we drove in my husband's car, packed with all our stuff. We drove to Ohio first. So we went to Ohio, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Maryland, and South Carolina before we settled in Panama City, Florida for a couple of months. And we were super, super lucky. We had several very, very generous, kind friends who offered their vacant homes to us during our journey. And so our first stop was Ohio. And so this is actually Cuyahoga Valley National Park here. And I spent a day with my sister-in-law on the bank of the majestic Lake Erie there. It was quite beautiful. I'm an East Coast girl. So I grew up on the Atlantic and lived a lot of my adult life on the Pacific, but I was really just taken aback at the vastness of our Great Lakes. To me, it actually just looked like the ocean. The horizon line was the horizon line. So this was our first park. I captured this little bee friend there.
Yeah.
And
it would be now. Oh.
Our first out of the area. So now we're heading down to Florida, and we're there. We stayed in Panama City, specifically Lynn Haven. And Lynn Haven, interestingly enough, was devastated seriously by Hurricane Michael a few years ago. And I was really, really surprised at the devastation and the destruction that still existed in that area. I mean, none of the trees had leaves on them. Many businesses and homes were still just completely in a state of disrepair. So there was a lot of construction going on. And even the home that we were in had experienced some significant flooding, and the bayou that we were on flowed into their living room. So they spent a lot of time and energy and money renovating after the storm. And while we were there, we realized, hey, we're in Florida. So there's a few major things that we want to see. One of them being Cocoa Beach and the other being Everglades National Park, where we spent the Christmas holidays. So we went to both Everglades and we squeezed in Biscayne National Park as well in Florida, and also Big Cypress. So that Florida Keys area is really quite beautiful. And it's composed of this limestone or carbonate sand and mud, and it's long, narrow islands that stretch in an arc from Biscayne National Park to the southwesternmost keys of remote Dry Tortugas National Park, which unfortunately we did not get to go to. So cross our fingers, our next trip will head out there. But what's interesting to me is that the island or the islands are made up of exposed remnants of coral reefs that were fossilized and exposed as sea levels declined. And so in a few slides, we are going to see some of those exposed coral reefs, and they are quite magnificent. So when we came to Everglades, we decided to go on a hike, and we saw this sign. This is where I'm channeling Maureen and all of her cool little things that she does on her trips.
To your vehicles.
So yeah, vultures. I'm like, where are we? And what kind of damage could they do? But you can see, we pulled into the parking lot, we saw this sign, and all of these cars, every car in the parking lot was wrapped in these blue tarps. And we thought, how odd for all these visitors from foreign places to know to bring a blue tarp. But we discovered as we walked into the trail that there was a storage unit and you could grab a tarp that we quickly put onto our car. And then we went on our hike and it was beautiful. And I have a couple of pictures, but when we came back, we took the tarp off and there were all of these white claw marks all over our car. My husband was freaking out, but we realized that we could just like take our sleeve and rub them off. But I felt really, because I guess their nails went into the cars. Anyway, you would think that they would figure out a way to they give us the tarps, and so that works. And it was kind of an interesting thing. Luckily the marks could be removed. Otherwise, I would have suggested the added "No hunting the vultures" sign, which is probably what my husband would have done if those marks had been permanent. So, can you see what's in that first picture on the left?
The crocodile or an alligator. See it there?
Yeah, we saw several, and you just kind of have to approach quietly, and there were many this is an alligator, so there were many of them, and it was very cool to see them. And then the picture on the left is a little light because of the sun, but we saw this beautiful bird when we first came in, and it was just a very gorgeous part of the country. And it is the Everglades, so it was quite warm and very humid, and and that took some getting used to. So we went from the high climate, the high altitude of Colorado down to sea level in a matter of days. Our bodies were taking their time adjusting. We also took a beautiful walk in Biscayne National Park while we were in Key West. The majority of this park is aquatic and only accessible by boat, but they did have just a very pretty trail that you could walk on. And I have a link to it too, because again, we're pressed for time. We have a lot to get through, but each of these parks that we went to have an extraordinary amount of history and information about them, which is just great. So I wanted to be able to put a couple of links in the chat for you. So what does that look like?
Oh, what does that look like?
Fossils?
Yeah. Fossils is exactly what it is. So as we were driving out to Key West, the one thing I have to say about every single state where we traveled, the state park system was equally as amazing. And so this was called the Windley Key Fossil Reef Geological State Park. And I was like, a fossil reef geological state park, we have to stop there. So we did. The state parks everywhere were just amazing. And so this one had a huge quarry. And I come from a quarry town, but it's a quarry of granite and you know, rock quarries. But this was Key Largo limestone or fossilized coral. And we spent quite a while there. We hiked the trail and we checked out all the different types of coral and plant life. And so as we were going there, we crossed over this like 7-mile long bridge that went over the water, went over the ocean area there. It was just weird. It just kept going on forever and ever and ever. And it was the coral was quarried to build Henry Flagler's Overseas Railroad in the early 1900s. It's a 7-mile railroad that was partially destroyed by a Category 5 hurricane in 1935. And so therefore it was unusable. And
so how do I do that? I want to be on mute.
I can help you be on mute. Hold on.
You got her.
I did it.
Okay,
I'm
good. Good. So this really was one of my most favorite places that we went. It was just fascinating to see all of this coral that had been fossilized and then used in a variety of ways to build this amazing railroad trestle, I guess. It's very cool.
Amazing, isn't it? Oh, look at the trees.
Yeah. So I'm a huge lover of spiders, snakes, and all things reptilian. So this was quite the find. It was enormous. I know it looks really, I can't tell. I wish it had some sort of a scale to it. Its web was very cool, but it itself was just one of the most impressive spiders I've ever seen. And I take a lot of spider pictures, but was very, very awesome. And then this tree, the photo really doesn't do it justice, but if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure it is a species of mangrove where the root system is exposed. And I remember seeing some mangrove trees in Kauai as well. So really quite beautiful. So more trees. The first national preserve in a national park is Big Cypress, and there are alligators there, Florida panthers. We saw several panther crossing signs as opposed to the deer crossing and moose crossing that we're used to, and elk crossing in Colorado. There were panther crossing and a lot of turtle crossing. It is home to bats and manatees and woodpeckers, and also a very invasive species of Burmese python, which unfortunately for me, we did not get to see. And fortunately for my husband, we did not get to see because he doesn't like snakes. But we did see this amazing tree on our walk, and I really should have been paying more scientific attention than artistic attention when I took the photo. But I just thought it was so interesting the way that I'm pretty sure it is 2 different species of tree, and one of them has wrapped itself around the trunk. Photo show material. And then on the right is a suspended catwalk that ran through the entire park and several of the parks. So this is where national parks, I'm pleased that they do it because it gets people up and being able to see. And also it's Everglades, so there's a lot of water underneath us and alligators and things that you don't want people running into. And I think they try and be as natural about it as they can. So they use a lot of natural materials when they're building. But I always feel like they have kind of intruded into the area where it was previously, a natural habitat. So, but I guess that's how you make it a national park, right? Okay, so now we left Florida in January of 2021 after the new year, and we went to South Carolina. And we had stopped in South Carolina on the way down, but on the way back to South Carolina, we visited Congaree National Park. And they too had a catwalk that was up above the ground, not too high. And it snaked around the entire park. And you could walk just like the picture shows, you could walk kind of into the woods. It was, I don't know if it was COVID or South Carolina. I really don't know the reason, but it was deserted. Almost all of the places that we went, we were the only people there, which was amazing. Even in the Everglades, we rarely ran into other people. So, and also there was a federal mask mandate on federal property, on federal lands. And so, everybody was wearing masks and doing hand washing. And so they were keeping COVID at bay. If you look down in the lower left-hand corner, what does that look like in my hand?
Snow?
It looks like snow, but remember where I am.
Is it cotton or is it a bird?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it is cotton. It is cotton. We were very lucky to have 2 tours in Montgomery, Alabama, and I developed a huge affinity for raw cotton, a bowl like this. And so the picture next to it, to its right, is a huge cotton field that had been picked already. So there were just a few little remnants. You can see a few little white specks. And so my husband pulled over and just quietly snuck up and just grabbed me a cotton bowl to take back with me. And I think I have it. I'll show it to you at the end. There were a lot of cotton fields in South Carolina. And so I was happy to take home a little piece of that. So the next slide is while we were, okay, so we left South Carolina and we went back down to Cocoa Beach, Florida. And so in the middle of March, we were here in Cocoa Beach and we were able to see the first stage of the SpaceX rocket on its landing platform, which Elon has called, Of Course I Still Love You. That's the name of the platform. And it stays out at sea off the coast of Cape Canaveral. So there's a launch from 39A, launch pad 39A typically. And what happens is when the rocket goes up into the air, that first stage where the engines are has a guidance system on it, and it comes back down to Earth so that it can be reused, which is just beyond the coolest thing ever. So he has 2 platforms that catch these and they land on them. You can Google not any, because they call it a secondary mission. The first mission is to get whatever's in the payload into orbit, but the secondary mission is to recapture the first stage. So there's 2 pads, and the other one is called Just Read the Instructions. It was really the coolest thing I experienced the whole trip, and so I really wanted to include it. We caught 3 launches from Cocoa Beach, which were pretty spectacular and never get old. The place where we were staying was right on the water, so we could look at we could see Cape Canaveral and see the launches as they were happening. It was pretty awesome. So with this picture, there had been a SpaceX launch a couple of days prior. So I think we got there on a Monday or a Tuesday, and the launch had been on Sunday. And it takes a couple of days to barge it in from the ocean. And so we drove over and we saw one on the pad, and the darkness from it is just soot from being on fire, basically, right? And entering through the atmosphere. And so SpaceX used to ship these back to Hawthorne, spray paint them white again, and use them for every launch. And now what they're doing is they're leaving them sooty. They're leaving them black. And when they are putting the next batch of astronauts up into the International Space Station, they're having them write their initials in the soot. just super cool. So in this picture here, the one that's sort of sunset, you can see the barge. So this is the water. This is on land, but this is coming in. And I wish that I had embedded a live photo, but this is just coming in. We watched it. So here's the barge. Here's the first stage. And then this one moved away. And then this one will come in and take its place before it gets reused again. So pretty awesome. Okay. So now we're in March and we realize, okay, we need to start our journey to the West Coast. We had decided at this point, so it's March, and we decided that our final destination would be Massachusetts. If you had asked me 9 months ago whether I had planned on coming back to Massachusetts, I would have said no. But COVID really helped us put things into perspective a little bit. And also my husband's newly retired status had us thinking about where we wanted to be. And so we both are from Massachusetts and our families are there. And so we decided to settle back in Massachusetts. However, we had rented a VRBO for April and May in Redondo Beach, California, where our middle son lives. And we have many, many friends where that's right where we moved before we came to Colorado. So we decided that we would travel from where we were in Florida and hit as many parks as we could, heading west to California. And our first stop was the unbelievable Carlsbad Caverns, but we didn't know you needed a reservation to go into the cave. So we'd explored a little bit and we decided to stay an extra day so we could tour the caves. So that picture will actually come a little bit later on. But while we were waiting for our cave tour, we went to Guadalupe Mountains National Park, which had a lot of trails and a lot of very cool geology. And we were getting there, like I said, this was about March, end of March. We were getting there when some of the desert plants were getting ready to bloom. And I think if we had slid the trip 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we would have seen a lot more bloom. So I took out the map and said to Dave, hey, White Sands National Park is only like a 4-hour drive. When you're driving 9 hours a day, 4 hours seems short. So he just gave me that look like, okay. And we decided to drive out to White Sands. Now, I have to say, it was unbelievable, like just so much sand and so different from sand dunes because this sand was just pure white. And it went on for miles and miles and miles and miles. And it was just amazing. So there was a missile base here and we stopped and went and explored some of the missile range, not the actual range, but some of the museum that they have there for it. And just as we were getting ready to leave, because we were going to drive back and our tour was the next day, this is what we saw.
You see a camel?
So, yeah, just a guy walking his 2 dogs and his camel, whatever. Took him out of like a little trailer and the camel was super well behaved and it was just the craziest thing. And I thought, what do you know? So just an interesting pic that we saw. So we finally made it to Carlsbad Caverns. We are big, I say speedlunkers, but we certainly are not speedlunkers. We like to go into caves and we like to walk around and pretend that we're speedlunking, but these are caves that have all been prepared for public use. We've been, there are a couple of caves. I'm trying to think, when we were in Utah, I feel like we went to a couple of caves, Wind Cave, when we were there. I have a couple of postcards, I'll have to check them out. But we love caves. I'm a huge cave girl. And I mostly went for the bats. So during certain times of the year, the bats will exit the cave, and they will come in, and they have a big amphitheater where everybody sits and they wait for all the bats to come in. And I was super excited about this. I love bats. And it was really much too windy, super windy. And the bats, I guess, do not, they're just little small mammals. And even though their wings are strong, they avoid the very windy weather. And also the guides there told us that it was still quite early in the season. And so that they were not, it may have been a little too cold for them, even though it was quite warm during the daytime, it did get cool at night. So because we didn't know we needed a reservation, we got one at the last minute. We got the first ticket of the day on Monday morning because we had to be someplace else that night. And they give you the opportunity to enter in through their natural cave opening, which is just, a cave opening. It's a hole in the ground, and you walk down, and it takes about an hour, and that lets you walk into the cave. But we didn't really have that amount of time, so we opted to take the elevator down 79 stories, which was quite a feat for my husband, who does not like enclosed spaces. But COVID worked to our benefit this time because they only let one party into the elevator at a time. So it was just he and I. It wasn't a whole bunch of people packed in. Because we had that first morning ticket, we had the cave to ourselves pretty much. There was one group, a couple of folks in front of us, but that was it. And so we got to walk through pretty much just by ourselves. It was amazing. And I even got a cave kiss. Can anybody guess what that might be? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't from Dave, right? It was it was water dripping down. So when you're in a cave, it's happening as you're there, and so the water, the condensation, if it falls on you, they call that a cave kiss. And so I was very excited to get one of those. Carlsbad Cavern is one of over 300 limestone caves in a fossil reef laid down by an inland sea about 265 million years ago. Seriously, it's just the most amazing thing. And so these pictures really do not do it justice. When you're down in there, number one, it's about 70 degrees, maybe a little chillier, but not uncomfortable. I had a jacket on. And so the cool thing about caves is that when they are open to the public, they are lit, obviously, artificially. But I only could imagine just walking through these caves as an explorer with my headlamp and my flashlight or whatever, and coming across the most amazing speleothems. And that's what I'm going to talk about really quick. I took the most amount of pictures on this tour because the formations were stunning and captivating. So those stalactites, I'm going to put it in the chat and see if it will let me type it in. Stalactites. So stalactites, when you see the sea, think icicle. Those are the ones that come down from the top. And then stalagmites, when you see the G in stalagmite, think of ground. And those are the ones that come up from the bottom. And this particular cave has a wonderful collection of those speleothems, which are cave formations, and they continue to grow and decorate Carlsbad Cavern due to the rain and snow melt. It soaks through the limestone rock and it drips into the cave. But inside those water drops, there are gases and dissolved minerals from the soil and the limestone. So when the drop evaporates, it releases that carbon dioxide, and a small amount of that mineral, mostly calcite, that's why it's very white, is left behind. So drip by drip, over the past million years or so, Carlsbad Cavern has been slowly decorating itself, and it was absolutely extraordinary. So I'm going to throw a link in there about the geology.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, if you get a chance to go, there's also Karchner, I think it is, caverns in near Tucson. Absolutely amazing. If you ever get a chance to go on a cave tour, you should. It's just beautiful, beautiful. So while we were still in New Mexico, we stopped at Petroglyph National Monument. Now, I had seen petroglyphs when we visited up by Zion. I think Zion, Sandy. Did you see the petroglyphs when you were there?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot. However, they're very, very different from what I saw here. They tended to be red, and these were not. So I will share with you in just a moment. Let's see. We learned the difference. So this was a national monument, and I didn't really know the difference between national monuments and national historic sites and battlefields and seashores and parks, but it's the way that they're established. And so Congress can create any kind of national park site by passing legislation designating the specific park. But US presidents can only create national monuments by using the authority granted to them by Congress in the Antiquities Act of 1906. So sometimes the president will set aside land as a national monument, and then Congress will later amend that monument, changing its designation to a different kind of national park site. So Theodore Roosevelt established the Grand Canyon as a national monument in 1908, but Congress later redesignated the site as a national park in 1919. So regardless, to be honest, of their designation, the preservation of some of these geological structures on the planet was just really quite amazing. So the kinds of petroglyphs that we saw here, this is igneous rock, so volcanic rock. Basalt is the kind of rock. It's super black and shiny. It's beautiful. And it has a high amount of iron and manganese and calcium in it that give it this sort of grayish color. But over thousands of years and wind and rain, they develop this sort of desert varnish, which is formed by the oxidation of the manganese and the iron, which appears black and glossy. And so these petroglyphs were formed by the removal of this varnish, by chipping away at it or carving with a sharp object. And they were all over the place. We really could have spent a lot of time in this park researching what each one meant. You know, if I was sort of a petroglyphologist, I just made that up. I'm sure there's something about that. But there's so much history here, ancient history involved in the people who carved them, what they mean. And they were really seriously amazing to find. It was kind of a treasure hunt to locate them because we had to go in between rocks and walk up this very, very, very steep set of rocks to get to the top where all the petroglyphs were, but it was really, really interesting to find them. So, Petrified Forest. We were not afraid to explore this park in the least, but upon entering the Petrified Forest, we must pass first through the absolutely beautiful Painted Desert. It was just, there are no words and there are no photographs that can convey how extraordinary this was. It was very Martian-like to me for some reason. I felt like I was on Mars, perhaps all the red iron. And I really could have done a whole slideshow just on the next several parks, but Painted Desert was amazing. And as you go in, I really have to kind of plead ignorance for the Petrified Forest because I was imagining sort of a sequoia-like forest of hardened upright trees, as unbelievable as that could be. Just the fact that they were petrified means that they could not be standing tall. But we were really surprised to find mostly tree trunks spread over large land areas, and only upon really, really close inspection, we were amazed at the mineral magnificence of the wood. It was just amazing. to see. I'm running out of superlatives. So at Petrified Forest, it's one of the most continuous sections of Triassic age rocks anywhere in the world. They were deposited, these rocks, petrified wood, were deposited by enormous rivers between 2008 and 2028 million years ago. And they contain themselves quite a large diversity of fossils. Petrified wood itself is a fossil, and it forms when plant material is buried by sediment and protected from decay due to oxygen and organisms. And then the groundwater, which has all those dissolved solids in it, flows through the sediment, and it replaces the original plant material in the cells of the tree with these minerals, to include silica or calcite, pyrite, other inorganic, so mineral material like opal. And the result is a fossil of the original woody material that often exhibits preserved details of the bark, the wood, and the cellular structures. And that's what has always drawn me to petrified wood. Actually, it petrifies pretty quickly, and certainly less time than I thought it does, and less time than it takes for wood to decay in a regular environment. If you are interested in, and I, for some reason, thought like the idea of petrified wood means it took place over millions of years, but that's not the case. It takes place fairly quickly. And I learned that on a petrified wood hike at the Cherokee Ranch and Castle in Sedalia. So I think I have a link I'll put in there, but there's one coming up where you can go. It's a little strenuous, but if you wear your hiking boots or if you have a walking stick, it is a absolutely fascinating tour of a considerable petrified forest right there in your own backyard. Also, if you go over to the Highlands Ranch mansion and you go in the back and you look at the bowling alley, so there's a long wall that's a bowling alley. There are some really nice pieces of petrified wood in that bowling alley wall. So it's on, I'm going to put it right in here, Saturday, August 7th is the tour over at Cherokee Ranch, and you can sign up online. The guy that gives it is super, super knowledgeable in geology, and when we went on it last year, it was just absolutely incredible.
Would you rather sit here in this chair? Would you rather sit in this chair?
So you can see that, particularly in this picture, some of that mineral color coming through. This is wood. I just thought it was crazy. So this piece, yeah, that's just wild. That's a rock, but it looks like a log. And so my husband, of course, had to buy a piece, and so now we have a big, huge chunk of petrified wood sitting on our hearth in our living room. But it was beautiful. Taking pictures of it up close and seeing all of the different colors, but also recognizing that it was a piece of wood was just amazing. So these are kind of light, but these are we made a very short stop here at Walnut Canyon National Monument to observe the ancient cliff dwellings. So all in here, you're sort of set back away from it, but all in here are these cliff dwellings where the indigenous people who lived in the area created their homes in the rock face. So this is kind of a strange story. When we were in Flagstaff, there were a few things I wanted to see there, and I was looking at our map, like a real live map in the car. Dave bought a Thomas guide and I became map reader, and I looked up and saw the Grand Canyon, and I said, this is really only an hour away. We should go do it. It's a lot closer than the sand dunes, so let's try it out. We made so many changes to our plans that we just didn't realize it was so close, but it was magnificent. We entered in the South Rim, and just that we hit a beautiful day. I like to take trees in my rocky pictures for some reason. Right here, can you see that this little arc of blue? It's really hard to see, but that is the Colorado River. I think I have a better pic. Hold on. Yeah. So that's the Colorado River running through the Grand Canyon. And there are obviously tours down there that you can go on, and people in that river. And there was like a little bridge thing down there. It was cool. I was not going down there. I was happy to look at it from a distance up top. And that's, you know, you're standing on these little rocky precipices looking down. And it's, to me, it was just exquisite that something so grand had been so well preserved and kept in such beautiful shape for us to see. So this was the Wupatki National Monument, and it was a quick stop for us because my husband stayed in the car to air quote listen to the ball game somehow with his eyes closed. But it was super hot, and we'd been driving for many days, and so it was kind of fun for me to explore this ancient Pueblo ruin on my own. There was just a short trail leading down into a sort of arena where tribal gatherings were held. And I took a few pictures of it here, but it was very interesting to think, so here's the scale of it. Here's some people. And so this was just a great Pueblo ruin. And by the time I hiked through it and back up, that inning was over and we were on our way once more. So Sunset Crater Volcano National Monument. I love volcanoes, and so I thought this would just be a great stop. I really did not know what to expect, and I was seriously blown away by what this particular site held. I found that this stop was the most fascinating, and the one that if anybody said, where would you go back? This is where I would say. Sunset Crater National Monument sits on the site of a dormant volcano. Its lava flows have been preserved as if they had just happened a couple of years ago. Sunset Crater preserves two volcanoes. The first is the park's namesake. It is a 1,000-foot tall cinder cone that erupted sometime around 1085 CE, which is Common Era. When Sunset Crater volcano erupted, it created a curtain of fire 850 feet tall. So for comparison, the Statue of Liberty is only 305 feet tall. It incinerated the landscape and everything around it. So for about 400 years, the area surrounding the volcano was barren, sterile. It had no plant life at all. And the first plants didn't return to the area until about 500 years ago. So what was really cool about this is this lava field. It's a trail that they developed through the lava field, which was awesome because they didn't do anything to it. They just kind of marked your way, but you were really navigating walking on this lava, which seemed super adventurous to us. And again, for whatever reason, we were the only people there. So it was like a huge playground for me. It was great. And again, all of this broken sort of lava left just the way it was. And I don't normally, I try and crop out stuff like this, but that gives it a little bit of scale. It was just amazing. Best place, super cool if you're ever in the Flagstaff area. We stopped at Montezuma Castle, National Monument, before we got to Tucson. And surprisingly, we were quite surprised. This was a very crowded venue. So we didn't spend a lot of time there. But we really couldn't dismiss those feelings of appreciation that we had for those with the foresight to preserve these kinds of antiquities. President Theodore Roosevelt in 1906 celebrated the passage of the Antiquities Act by declaring 4 sites of historic and cultural significance. And one of them is as our first national monuments. And among these was Montezuma's Castle. He called it a place of great ethnological value and scientific interests. However, they really didn't do a very good job back then of managing the people who saw it. So they had quite a bit of looting and quite a bit of taking of all of the artifacts from the site. But it is one of the best preserved prehistoric cliff dwellings in North America. So they did, I think in 1933, a portion of it was excavated, and the Sinagua, which translates to without water people, who lived along Beaver Creek for over 400 years. They found quite a lot of artifacts from this group. I have a little article that I'm going to throw in here for you. Okay. So we did Montezuma, and then we ended up at Saguaro. So we had friends who live in Tucson, and they invited us to stay with them, and it was amazing. We were surrounded by these amazing cacti, these huge cactus that were everywhere, and they were many of them were just starting to bloom. And I think, yeah, we captured right here. So imagine this at the very top of these. There are these gorgeous flowers, and they open at night and they close the following afternoon. And the only way that they'll develop into fruits is they have to be pollinated during that opening closing time. And so they have a lot of bats, birds, insects. Oftentimes we saw holes in the, I don't think you call it a trunk, but in the portion of the plant. And there were a lot of owls that were burrowing and nesting in there. So it's quite a beautiful site. This is an example of a pink flower hedgehog cactus flower and Engelmann's prickly pear cactus flower. And these were pretty much, the yellow were more prevalent. So we were able to see not as much flowering because we were a little bit early. Like I said, I think if we had gone maybe a couple of weeks later, we would have had more, we would have seen more things in bloom. So Tucson, we said farewell to our friends and the saguaro cactus, and our final destination was the Pacific Ocean. And we stayed here at the beach for about 30 days. We caught a couple of sunsets. We came during May gray, June gloom. It was just gloomy and reminded me why I don't live there anymore. So as gorgeous as it was, I need that high barometric pressure. And so I'm happy to look outside and see some blue sky right now. We had quite a bit of marine layer there. So from here, from California, we drove back through Colorado, made a quick stop, picked up our stuff, and had it shipped to Massachusetts. And on the way, we stopped again in Ohio, and stopped in New York at Niagara Falls. And that, I see Lee smiling, that was amazing. Living in Massachusetts, I do not know why I have never been to Niagara Falls, but it was absolutely extraordinary. And we think that our next trip it will be a transcontinental Canadian trip, going from that sort of our neck of the woods now in Canada, so up by Quebec and Ottawa, and traveling west. So I will say that the National Parks website does a really wonderful job for folks who can't get out to see the parks and monuments. There are videos and information. Check it out. I'm going to give you a good link here. They also, this is the app. This is the link to the app, but they have a great app that works inside the parks, where oftentimes there's not a lot of connectivity, rightfully so, but they have a beautiful collection of websites that has been updated. Interestingly enough, now the new administration seems to have put a lot of effort into making sure that the data on there is current and updated, and is chock full of information. So that is the end of our journey. It was quite good, quite fun. Does anybody have any questions?
Janine, before you leave or anything like that, can you let people know how to save the links in the chat?
Yes, thank you so much. So yeah, I have a few closing things. So if you have your chat open, so down the bottom of your, I don't want to stop sharing quite yet, but I will in a minute. Down the bottom of your screen where you see mute, stop video, security, chat, you can click that and it will open the chat, and all of the links that I put in there will be hyperlinked, which means that you can click on them in blue and it will take you to a website. If you did it now, it would take you to the website, but it might cover the screen and you'd have to make it small. But there's a little button that says, if you were to type in the chat, and if you'd like to do that now, you may, but next to it, it says file. And then to the right of that, there's a box with 3 dots. And when you click on that, the first option is to save chat. And what saving the chat does is it saves all those links so that you can cut and paste them later on if you wanted to check them out.
Oh, the tree. There we go. No.
So I'll leave them up there for you. As Lee said, so great news that the Spark program will return to live in-person programming. And as the new artistic director, Lee will remain a part of the Spark program, which is wonderful. And we'll keep everybody in the loop about what's coming up. And this is our last virtual program. So I want to thank definitely all of my fellow Lone Tree Art Center ushers and ambassadors. They have supported me in all of these Spark presentations from the early days when we would spend a lot of time rehearsing and making sure that the tech piece was good. It was just an honor for me to be able to present them. So I'm really, really thankful for the opportunity. So I'm actually going to, shall I stop sharing?
Yeah, you can stop sharing.
Oh, okay.
And I also do want to appreciate you, Janine, for a moment, because you've really done so much for the Spark programming that we've had, not just over the pandemic time, but before then. And we're going to miss you. We're sad. We're so happy that you're in Massachusetts for you, but we're sad for us because it means you're not here. So thank you so much for everything that you've done for Spark over the past 5 years, really.
Well, you are welcome. It's been great. And I will remind folks that, there are other museums that have, the Denver Art Museum has an excellent Spark program. Some of you may be familiar with Art and About. But if you look on the internet under Spark, I guess I should have put the link in there, but the Spark Alliance is a nationwide thing, and they have other museums. The Brooklyn Museum in New York has some, the Museum of Fine Arts here in Boston has some. So there's a lot of good virtual programming still out there. And again, hopefully you'll get a chance to head back into the Lone Tree Art Center and check out the Spark in-person programming, and definitely eat those cookies and lemonade, because that's what we all miss the most, right?
All right, well, thanks so much for joining, everyone. We will have the links to this up on our website probably in the next day or two. If you want to rewatch it, it'll just link to a YouTube page. And we really appreciate you joining us as always, and hope to see you in the fall.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Good to see everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh.